Welcome back to Fresh Homegrown Harvest, where we explore practical ways to grow more of what we need, reduce waste, and turn even a small piece of land into something useful. Today, we're talking about a tree that has earned a reputation for being one of the most useful plants a backyard chicken keeper can grow: Moringa. You may have seen moringa trees growing quietly along roadsides, around farms, or in backyard gardens without realizing just how valuable those leaves can be. Once established, moringa can produce a steady supply of leafy green material that chickens may enjoy as part of a balanced diet. But before we get too excited about the idea of never buying chicken feed again, let's clear up one important point. Moringa is not a magic replacement for complete poultry feed, and chickens still need a properly balanced diet containing adequate energy, protein, vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients. But that doesn't make moringa unimportant. Quite the opposite. When grown and used correctly, it can become a valuable supplemental green feed that helps diversify what your chickens eat while giving you another useful crop from your garden. And that's what makes this tree so interesting. Think about the difference between planting something once and harvesting it repeatedly, compared with buying fresh greens every time your chickens need them. A healthy moringa tree can keep producing new leaves after careful pruning, allowing you to harvest small amounts regularly rather than clearing the entire plant at once. For a homesteader, gardener, or backyard chicken keeper, that repeated harvest is one of the biggest attractions. Moringa is sometimes called the drumstick tree, and its scientific name is Moringa oleifera. It is a fast-growing tree that performs particularly well in warm climates and can tolerate conditions that would challenge many other plants. In tropical and subtropical regions, that can make it especially useful for gardeners who want a productive, perennial source of foliage. Instead of waiting years for a mature fruit tree, you can often see surprisingly rapid growth when moringa receives warmth, sunlight, moisture, and reasonable soil conditions. One of the reasons moringa works so well in a home garden is that it doesn't necessarily need to become a giant tree before you can begin managing it for leaves. In fact, regular pruning can encourage a bushier growth pattern and make harvesting easier. If you simply let it grow upward without management, you may eventually end up with a tall tree whose leaves are harder to reach. But if you prune strategically, you can encourage multiple branches and keep the plant at a more manageable height. Imagine walking outside in the morning and seeing fresh green growth appearing on the branches. Instead of buying a bag of leafy vegetables specifically for your chickens, you can harvest a small amount from your own garden. You can carry those leaves directly to the chicken area and let the birds investigate them. Some chickens will immediately start pecking at fresh leaves. Others may ignore them at first and become interested after seeing their flock mates eating. That behavior is completely normal. Chickens are curious animals, but they can also be suspicious of unfamiliar foods. If your birds have never seen moringa before, don't assume they dislike it simply because they don't attack the leaves immediately. Try offering a small amount alongside familiar food. You can also chop tender leaves into smaller pieces and mix them with other appropriate greens so the chickens have an easier opportunity to sample them. The leaves are the main attraction for this purpose. Young, tender moringa leaves can be harvested and offered fresh. You don't need to strip an entire branch bare. In fact, responsible harvesting is better because the tree needs enough foliage to continue photosynthesizing and producing new growth. Think of the tree as a living feed garden rather than a one-time crop. Take what you need while leaving enough healthy growth behind for the plant to recover. This is where pruning becomes especially important. If your goal is to produce leaves rather than simply grow a tall ornamental tree, pruning can help shape the plant into a compact, productive form. When new shoots are encouraged to branch, you can potentially create many more accessible points for harvesting. Instead of having one tall trunk with leaves concentrated high above your head, you can have a bushier plant that produces usable foliage closer to ground level. But there's another major advantage to growing moringa. You can propagate it. Depending on your local conditions and the method you choose, moringa can be grown from seeds and it can also be propagated from suitable cuttings. Seeds are a straightforward way to start new plants, while healthy cuttings can sometimes establish quickly under favorable conditions. This means one successful tree can potentially become the starting point for a small collection of moringa plants. Imagine planting several trees along the edge of your garden instead of taking up valuable space in the middle of your vegetable beds. You could create a small living source of green material that produces leaves season after season. The exact amount you can harvest will depend on your climate, soil, water, pruning practices, plant health, and how many trees you grow. But the basic idea is simple. Grow the resource instead of continually purchasing it. Moringa also has another feature that makes it interesting for people who want productive gardens. It is not just useful as a chicken supplement. Humans have traditionally used moringa leaves as a food ingredient in many regions, and different parts of the plant have been used in traditional food systems. However, if you're growing it primarily for chickens, you can dedicate certain plants or sections of the tree to poultry use while keeping your human food harvest separate. Now, let's talk about something extremely important. Moringa should be a supplement, not the entire chicken diet. Chickens require a balanced nutritional profile, and leafy greens alone cannot provide everything they need. A complete commercial poultry ration is formulated to supply the nutrients birds require at different stages of life. Depending on whether you're raising chicks, pullets, laying hens, or meat birds, their nutritional needs can differ. So when someone says, plant this tree and feed your chickens forever, the better interpretation is that the tree can provide a renewable source of supplemental greenery. It can help add variety to the bird's diet, but it shouldn't be treated as a substitute for a properly formulated feed. The goal is not to eliminate balanced nutrition. The goal is to grow useful supplemental food right outside your door. This distinction is especially important with young chicks. Chicks have very different nutritional requirements from mature chickens, and their starter feed is designed specifically around those needs. Don't replace chick starter with random garden greens. Let young birds receive an appropriate, complete starter ration and treat additional foods as optional supplements only when appropriate for their age and management system. For mature chickens, fresh greens can become an enjoyable part of their environment. You might hang a bundle of appropriate leaves where the birds can peck at them, chop the leaves and scatter them through a clean area, or mix small amounts with other suitable foods. The goal is to encourage natural foraging behavior without allowing treats and greens to displace the nutritionally complete portion of their diet. Another reason gardeners like moringa is its relationship with warm weather. If you're gardening in a tropical climate, you may have an advantage because moringa naturally prefers warmth. In colder climates, however, gardeners need to consider frost and winter temperatures. A plant that grows vigorously in warm conditions may struggle or die back in cold weather. Your local climate should therefore influence whether you grow moringa outdoors year-round, protect it seasonally, or choose another locally adapted green feed crop. Location matters too. Moringa generally performs best when it receives plenty of sunlight. Before planting, look around your property and identify areas that receive strong light for much of the day. Avoid placing the tree where it will constantly compete with large established trees for sunlight, water, and root space. Give it room to develop while keeping future harvesting in mind. Drainage is another important consideration. Moringa can tolerate periods of dry conditions once established, but that doesn't mean its roots should sit in permanently waterlogged soil. Heavy, poorly drained ground can create problems for many plants. If your soil holds water for long periods, consider improving drainage or choosing a better planting location. When planting moringa from seed, start with healthy seed and provide suitable growing conditions. Planting depth, moisture, temperature, and soil quality can all influence germination. Keep the growing medium appropriately moist during establishment without turning it into a swamp. Once the seedlings emerge, give them plenty of light and protect them from being trampled, eaten, or damaged. Young moringa plants can look surprisingly delicate compared with what they eventually become. Don't be discouraged if the seedlings seem small at first. Under favorable conditions, growth can accelerate dramatically. At the same time, fast-growing plants can become leggy if they don't receive enough light. Good sunlight and sensible spacing can help produce stronger, healthier growth. Once the tree is established, your focus changes from simply keeping it alive to managing it productively. This is where regular pruning can make a huge difference. Rather than waiting until the plant becomes enormous, begin shaping it according to the height you can comfortably manage. Use clean pruning tools and avoid damaging the main structure unnecessarily. You don't need to harvest everything at once. In fact, frequent light harvesting can be more practical than aggressive cutting. Take a reasonable amount of tender, leafy growth and leave enough healthy foliage for continued growth. If you have several trees, rotate your harvesting among them. One tree can recover while another provides your next harvest. And this brings us to one of the biggest secrets of a sustainable chicken garden. Don't depend on a single plant. Even if moringa becomes one of your favorite green feed sources, your chickens can benefit from variety. Other suitable garden greens can be grown alongside it, depending on your climate and what is safe and appropriate for poultry. This gives you a more resilient system instead of relying entirely on one tree. You can think of your chicken feed system as having several layers. At the center is the balanced poultry ration. Around that, you can build a garden of supplemental foods. Moringa can be one layer. Suitable vegetables, garden greens, and other appropriate forage can become additional layers. Then your chickens have a more varied environment while you have more options for producing some of their supplemental food yourself. There is something satisfying about reducing waste. Have you ever looked at a garden plant and realized that part of it could have been useful instead of being discarded? A productive homestead teaches you to look at resources differently. Leaves, trimmings, garden surplus, and other appropriate plant materials can sometimes become useful inputs instead of waste. Moringa fits beautifully into that mindset. But don't make the mistake of throwing every garden scrap into the chicken run. Not every plant is safe for chickens, and moldy, rotten, heavily contaminated, or chemically treated material should not be offered. Learn which plants are appropriate for poultry and keep potentially harmful plants away from the birds. The fact that something is natural does not automatically make it safe. You also need to consider pesticides and other garden chemicals. If moringa is intended for your chickens, think carefully about what you apply to it. Avoid exposing poultry feed plants to products that are not appropriate for edible crops or animal consumption. A simple approach is often best. Maintain healthy soil, encourage vigorous growth, control serious pest problems responsibly, and avoid unnecessary chemical applications. Now let's talk about harvesting. You can harvest leaves and tender shoots using clean tools or by hand when appropriate. Don't rip large sections of the plant apart. A clean cut can help you manage the shape of the tree while encouraging new branching. Harvest during a time that fits your routine and avoid taking more foliage than the plant can comfortably replace. Fresh moringa leaves can be offered directly to chickens. Some people also dry leaves and store them for later use, particularly when seasonal conditions reduce fresh growth. If you choose to dry leaves, make sure they are clean and dried thoroughly in suitable conditions so moisture doesn't become trapped and lead to mold. Store dried plant material in a clean, dry location. But again, dried moringa should be treated as supplemental material, not as the complete feed. It's easy to become excited when you discover a plant that grows abundantly, but abundance doesn't automatically equal nutritional completeness. Chickens still need their core diet. The best system is one where moringa adds value without replacing the essentials. One interesting way to use moringa is as part of a small rotational forage area. Instead of letting chickens destroy the base of a tree, you can harvest the leaves yourself and bring them to the birds. This can protect young plants while giving you control over how much greenery the chickens receive. As the trees mature, you can develop a routine that fits the number of birds you keep. If you're raising only a few backyard hens, you may not need a huge plantation. A small number of healthy trees could provide plenty of supplemental leaves for your household flock. But if you're managing a larger flock, however, you'll need to think about scale. More chickens require more feed, and no single tree should be expected to supply everything. This is where calculating your resources becomes useful. Count your chickens. Estimate how much complete feed they normally consume, then think about how much supplemental greenery you can realistically produce. The answer will help you decide how many moringa trees to grow and how aggressively to harvest them. Instead of making exaggerated promises, build a system based on what your land can actually support. Another smart strategy is to plant moringa where it can serve multiple purposes. A carefully positioned tree can provide shade, foliage, and a source of useful biomass while also becoming part of the overall landscape. However, don't put it so close to your chicken coop that falling branches, excessive moisture, or root competition create problems. Plan for the mature size of the plant, not just the tiny seedling you see on planting day. If you have enough room, you can even create a dedicated chicken garden. This doesn't mean chickens should have unrestricted access to everything growing there. Instead, it means you deliberately grow certain plants with the birds in mind. Moringa can become one of the permanent features, while seasonal greens fill the gaps around it. This kind of garden can change the way you think about chicken keeping. Instead of viewing feed as something that only comes in a bag, you begin to see nutrition as part of a larger farm system. You grow crops, harvest some for the household, use suitable surplus for the birds, compost what can be composted, and return nutrients to the soil. Each part of the system supports another part. And moringa can fit into that cycle because the plant itself can produce substantial leafy growth. Pruning provides material for the chickens while helping you control the tree's shape. Fallen leaves can contribute organic matter to the soil when managed appropriately. The tree becomes more than just another plant in the garden. It becomes part of your production system. But there's a common mistake you should avoid: planting moringa and then forgetting about it. Fast growth doesn't mean zero maintenance. Young trees may need watering while establishing, protection from animals, weed competition control, and occasional pruning. Like any crop, its performance depends on the conditions you provide. You should also watch the tree for signs of stress. Yellowing leaves, poor growth, damaged stems, persistent pests, or unusual discoloration can indicate that something is wrong. Don't assume more fertilizer is always the answer. First check sunlight, watering, drainage, soil condition, pests, and physical damage. Healthy plants usually give you better results than heavily fertilized plants struggling in the wrong location. And here's an important lesson for anyone building a homestead. The cheapest feed is not always the best feed if producing it takes more time and resources than it saves. Your goal should be efficiency, not simply avoiding every purchase. If a moringa tree grows easily in your area and produces useful supplemental foliage with little effort, that's a win. If you spend enormous amounts of time trying to force a tree to grow in an unsuitable climate, the economics may look very different. The beauty of moringa is that it can be relatively low maintenance once established under suitable conditions. That makes it attractive for people who want productive plants without creating another full-time job. Plant it in the right location, establish it well, prune it sensibly, harvest responsibly, and allow it to continue growing. You may also find that chickens enjoy the activities surrounding fresh greens. Chickens naturally spend time pecking, scratching, searching, and exploring. Offering suitable plant material can provide another opportunity for natural foraging behavior. Just remember that the chicken run should remain clean, safe, and properly managed. Fresh greens are an addition to good husbandry, not a replacement for clean water, shelter, sanitation, and appropriate nutrition. Speaking of water, never overlook it. Chickens need constant access to clean drinking water. Even the most impressive garden feeding system cannot compensate for inadequate water. Keep drinkers clean and make sure all birds can access them. In hot weather, water becomes particularly important because birds can become stressed by high temperatures. The same principle applies to minerals and grit where appropriate. Depending on your chicken's diet and whether they are laying eggs, their nutritional needs can vary. Laying hens, for example, require appropriate calcium and other nutrients to support egg production. A leafy green tree cannot replace a balanced feeding program designed for the birds you're raising. So, is moringa worth planting? For many gardeners in suitable warm climates, absolutely. It is fast-growing, productive, useful beyond poultry feeding, and capable of producing repeated leafy harvests. But the real value isn't that one tree magically eliminates your feed bill. The real value is that you're growing another resource on your own property. Think about what happens when you plant a moringa tree today. At first, you see a seed or tiny seedling. Then you see a stem. Then branches appear. Leaves begin filling out. With good care, that little plant can become a recurring source of greenery. Every time you harvest responsibly, you are using the growth that your land, sunlight, water, and plant have produced. That's a powerful idea for anyone interested in self-sufficiency. You don't have to grow every ounce of food your household or animals consume. You don't need a massive farm. You don't need a warehouse full of equipment. Sometimes, the biggest improvements come from small systems that produce something repeatedly. A moringa tree is one of those systems. It turns sunlight into biomass. It grows vertically. It can be pruned. It can be harvested repeatedly. And when incorporated responsibly into a poultry system, its leaves can provide an additional source of green food for your flock. Imagine looking at your chicken run a year from now. Instead of thinking only about how much feed you need to purchase, you look around and see productive plants growing nearby. You have vegetables in the garden, herbs in containers, compost returning nutrients to the soil, and moringa trees producing fresh foliage. You're still providing your chickens with their balanced feed, but now you're also producing part of their supplemental diet yourself. That's the kind of independence that makes gardening so rewarding. It isn't about doing everything yourself. It's about gradually creating more useful resources around you. And if you decide to plant moringa, start with 1 or 2 trees and learn how they perform in your specific environment. Watch their growth. Learn how much water they need. Experiment with pruning. See how your chickens respond to the leaves. Keep track of how much you harvest. Once you understand the plant, you can decide whether expanding makes sense. Don't fall for the idea that more is always better. A healthy, well-managed tree is more useful than 10 neglected trees. Good planting beats excessive planting. Give each tree enough light and space, keep harvesting reasonable, and focus on building a system you can maintain. You can also share cuttings or seeds with other gardeners if local regulations and plant health considerations allow it. One person's productive tree can inspire another person's backyard garden. That's how useful gardening knowledge spreads. One successful experiment becomes another person's starting point. And there's one final mindset shift I want you to remember. When you walk through your garden, don't only ask, "What can I eat?" Ask, "What can this plant contribute?" Maybe it provides food for your family. Maybe it attracts beneficial insects. Maybe it provides mulch material. Maybe it supplies shade. Maybe it produces leaves that can become supplemental forage. A productive garden can have multiple functions. Moringa is a perfect example of that multifunctional approach. It can be grown as a food plant, managed as a source of foliage, incorporated into a homestead landscape, and used as part of a broader poultry feeding strategy. Its value comes from the combination of these characteristics rather than from one exaggerated claim. So, if you have chickens and live in a climate where moringa can thrive, consider giving this tree a place in your garden. Plant it where it can receive plenty of sunlight. Give it appropriate care while young. Protect it from damage. Prune it to encourage manageable growth. Harvest the leaves responsibly. And most importantly, keep those leaves in their proper role, a useful supplement to a balanced chicken diet, not a complete replacement for poultry feed. Because the goal isn't really to never buy chicken feed again. The goal is to become less dependent on a single source while creating more resources right where you live. That's a much more realistic and sustainable goal. And once you start thinking this way, you may discover dozens of other opportunities around your property. Maybe there's a corner that could grow herbs. Maybe a fence line could support climbing vegetables. Maybe food scraps could become compost. Maybe an unused patch of soil could become a forage garden. A productive homestead is built one small improvement at a time. So plant the tree, learn how to manage it, let it become part of your garden system. And years from now, when you're harvesting fresh green leaves from a tree you planted yourself, you'll understand why plants like moringa can be so valuable. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to Fresh Homegrown Harvest for more practical gardening, backyard farming, food growing, and homesteading ideas. And if you already grow moringa, tell us in the comments how you use it. Do your chickens enjoy the leaves? How quickly does it grow in your area? Have you tried pruning it into a bushier form? Share your experience, because your idea could help another gardener watching this video from somewhere around the world. And remember, you don't need acres of land to start producing more. You can start with one tree, one garden bed, one container, or even one handful of seeds. The important thing is to start learning how the resources around you can work together. Moringa won't magically eliminate your chicken feed bill, and no single plant should be expected to do that. But a productive moringa tree can give you something extremely valuable, a renewable source of supplemental greenery that you can grow yourself. Plant once, manage wisely, harvest responsibly, and let the tree keep working for you season after season. That's the real secret, not free food forever, but building a garden that keeps giving back. Thanks for watching Fresh Homegrown Harvest. Keep planting, keep growing, keep learning, and most importantly, keep making the most of what your garden can provide. We'll see you in the next video.